When I was pregnant, my mother-in-law threw me out of the house. 10 years later, she showed up at my door and dropped to her knees, begging me to forgive her. I'm glad you're here. Stay with me until the end. And tell me where you're watching from. I never thought I'd tell this story out loud, but some things deserve to be remembered exactly as they happened. That night still lives in my body like a quiet echo. It was a Sunday. I remember because I had spent the morning folding tiny baby clothes, soft cotton onesies in pale yellow. I hadn't told many people yet, but I was just over 4 months pregnant. I used to hold those little clothes up to the light, imagining who my baby might become. The house was warm that evening. Too warm, the kind of heat that makes the air feel heavy, like something is about to break. Dinner was already on the table when I came downstairs. My husband sat across from his mother, not speaking. He didn't look at me when I entered. He just stared at his plate like it had all the answers. That was the first thing I noticed. The silence. It wasn't the comfortable kind. It was sharp, waiting. I took my seat slowly, one hand resting on my stomach without even thinking. It had become a habit by then. A quiet reassurance, a reminder that I wasn't alone anymore. Are you going to tell her? My mother-in-law said, not looking at me. Or should I? Her voice was calm, too calm. I looked at my husband. He still didn't meet my eyes. What's going on? I asked. No one answered right away. The clock on the wall ticked louder than usual. I remember counting 3 seconds. Maybe 4. Then she turned to me. You need to leave, she said. Just like that. No raised voice, no explanation, just a sentence placed carefully on the table, like it belonged there. I thought I had misheard her. I'm sorry, I said. You heard me, she replied, finally looking at me. This house is not for you anymore. I waited for my husband to say something. Anything. A correction, a laugh, a defense. He didn't. He picked up his fork, put it down again, still looking at his plate. I'm pregnant, I said, my voice quieter than I expected. I know, she said. That was it. No surprise, no warmth, no concern. Just acknowledgement. The room felt smaller after that, like the walls had leaned in closer. I have nowhere to go, I said. She shrugged, slightly, almost bored. That's not my problem. I looked at my husband one last time. He finally glanced up. And then, he looked away. I didn't cry. I didn't argue. I just stood up, walked upstairs, and began folding my clothes into a suitcase. Carefully, quietly. The house felt different that night. Not louder, not quieter. Just empty in a way I hadn't noticed before. I moved slowly, folding my clothes into the suitcase I had used when I first moved in after the wedding. Back then, it had been full of hope. New dresses, small dreams, things I thought would last. Now it held only what I could carry. I didn't take much. A few outfits, my documents, the small box where I kept ultrasound photos. I hesitated when I picked it up, just for a second. Then I placed it carefully between my sweaters. Downstairs, I could hear the faint clinking of dishes. My mother-in-law cleaning up dinner. The same routine, the same house. As if nothing had changed. As if I had already left. I zipped the suitcase and stood there for a moment, looking around the room, the bed we used to share, the window I used to open every morning, the chair in the corner where I sat when I first found out I was pregnant. Everything was still in place. Just not mine anymore. When I walked back downstairs, they were both in the kitchen. She was wiping the counter. He was standing near the sink, scrolling on his phone. Neither of them looked surprised to see the suitcase. Where will you go? He asked. Finally. It was the first thing he had said to me all night. I don't know, I answered. And that was the truth. He nodded, not concerned, not relieved, just acknowledging. Like we were discussing the weather. My mother-in-law didn't say anything. She didn't need to. Her silence had already said enough. I reached for my coat. It was early fall, but the air outside had already turned cold in the evenings. I could feel it through the windows. At the door, I paused. Not because I expected them to stop me, but because some part of me, small and stubborn, waited anyway. For a voice. For footsteps. For anything that sounded like change. Nothing came. I opened the door. The air outside was sharp. It hit my face immediately, stealing the warmth from my skin. I stepped out, pulling the coat tighter around me, one hand resting instinctively over my stomach. I remember thinking how quiet the street was. No cars, no voices. Just the sound of my suitcase wheels against the pavement. I didn't look back. I thought if I did, it would make it real. Instead, I kept walking. Past the mailbox, past the small tree in the front yard, past the life I thought I had built. Step by step. That night, I learned something I had never understood before. You don't always leave a place because you want to. Sometimes, you leave because staying would mean disappearing completely. I didn't go far that night. There was a bus stop 3 blocks away. I had passed it 100 times before, never thinking I would need it. Now it was the only place I could think of. The bench was cold when I sat down. Metal always holds the night longer than anything else. I placed the suitcase beside me and kept one hand over my stomach. Like I had done all evening. Cars passed occasionally, headlights sliding across the pavement, then disappearing. No one stopped. No one asked. I remember watching the houses across the street. Windows glowing warm, curtains drawn halfway, shadows moving inside. Normal lives. Dinner tables, conversations, people who belonged somewhere. I didn't feel like I belonged anywhere at that moment. I checked my phone. No messages. Not from him, not from anyone. I scrolled through my contacts slowly. Names I hadn't called in years. Old coworkers, a distant cousin, a friend I used to have before marriage changed everything. I hovered over a few numbers. Then I locked the screen. It was late. And I didn't know how to explain what had just happened without making it sound unreal. The bus came after 20 minutes. I didn't check where it was going. I just got on. The driver didn't look at me twice. I paid, took a seat near the window, and placed my suitcase between my feet. The city moved quietly outside. Streetlights, closed shops, empty sidewalks. Everything looked the same. But nothing felt the same. I rested my head against the glass. It was colder than I expected. My eyes stayed open, watching reflections instead of thinking too much. That helped. Thinking too much would have broken something. After a few stops, I pulled the cord. I didn't recognize the area when I stepped off. There was a small motel on the corner. The kind with a flickering sign and thin curtains. I stood there for a moment, looking at it. Then I walked in. The man at the front desk didn't ask questions. He handed me a key and pointed down the hall. The room smelled faintly of cleaning chemicals. The bed was too stiff. The blanket too thin. But it had a door that locked. That was enough. I placed the suitcase on the floor and sat on the edge of the bed. My shoes were still on. I didn't bother taking them off. For a long time, I just sat there. The silence was different from the house. Not sharp. Not waiting. Just quiet. I reached into my bag and took out the ultrasound photo. The edges were slightly bent from being carried around. A small shape, barely clear. But real. I looked at it for a while. Then I placed it on the nightstand. "I've got you," I said softly. My voice sounded unfamiliar in the room. But steady. That night, I didn't cry. I lay down fully dressed, one hand still resting over my stomach. And for the first time since I closed that front door behind me, I understood something simple. No one was coming to fix this. So I would have to build something new. From nothing. Morning came too quietly. No alarm, no footsteps in the hallway, no sound of someone making coffee downstairs. Just light. Thin, pale light slipping through the cheap motel curtains. I opened my eyes slowly, not because I was rested, but because there was nothing else to do. For a few seconds, I didn't remember where I was. Then I saw the ceiling. Plain, cracked in one corner. And it all came back. I sat up, the blanket sliding off my shoulders. My back ached from sleeping in the same position all night. My shoes were still on. My coat still wrapped around me. I looked at the nightstand. The ultrasound photo was still there. Untouched. I reached for it and held it in both hands this time. The room was quiet enough that I could hear my own breathing. Slow, steady. I placed the photo back down and stood up. The mirror near the door caught my reflection as I moved. I stopped. For a moment, I just looked. My hair was slightly messy. My face pale. There were faint shadows under my eyes that hadn't been there a week ago. I didn't look broken. Just older. Like something had shifted overnight. I washed my face in the small sink. The water ran cold at first, then slowly warmed. I let it run longer than necessary, watching it disappear down the drain. It felt easier to focus on small things. Water, movement, routine. Instead of everything else. I didn't have a plan. That was the part that settled in quietly as I got dressed. No home to return to. No one expecting me. No voice waiting on the other side of a phone. Just me. And the child I hadn't even met yet. I sat on the edge of the bed again and opened my bag. There wasn't much inside. A few folded clothes, my documents, the ultrasound, a small envelope with some cash I had been saving without really thinking about why. I counted it. Not much. But enough for a few nights. Maybe a week if I was careful. I folded it back slowly. Carefully. Like it mattered. Because now, it did. My phone was still silent. I turned it on, stared at the screen for a few seconds. No missed calls. No messages. Not even a question. I set it down again. That told me everything I needed to know. I wasn't being looked for. I wasn't being missed. I walked to the window and pulled the curtain aside slightly. The street outside was already moving. Cars passing, people walking, someone carrying a cup of coffee in one hand, keys in the other. Normal morning. Normal lives. I stood there for a while, watching. Then I let the curtain fall back into place. That was when a memory came back. Not loud. Just, there. A different morning. Years ago. Same kind of light coming through a different window. I had been standing in the kitchen, holding a cup of coffee, listening to my mother-in-law talk about how this house would always be family. How I was part of it now. I remember smiling. I remember believing her. I remember thinking I had found something stable. Something that would last. I let out a small breath. Not heavy. Not dramatic. Just acknowledging. Some things sound permanent when they're said. Until they aren't. I picked up my suitcase and walked toward the door. This time, I didn't pause. I didn't wait for anything. Because I understood something clearly now. There was no going back to what I thought I had. Only forward. Even if I didn't know where that was yet. The air outside felt different in the morning. Colder, sharper. Or maybe I just noticed it more. I adjusted the strap of my bag on my shoulder and started walking. I didn't have a destination. Just a direction. Forward. The sidewalk stretched out in front of me, lined with small stores just opening for the day. A coffee shop on the corner. A laundromat with the lights already on. A grocery store receiving early deliveries. Normal life. I stepped into the coffee shop without thinking too much about it. The bell above the door rang softly as I entered. Warm air wrapped around me immediately. The smell of fresh coffee. Toasted bread. People sitting quietly with their phones or newspapers. No one looked at me twice. That helped. I ordered the cheapest thing on the menu. A small coffee. Black. The girl behind the counter smiled politely, handed it to me, and moved on to the next customer. Simple. I sat near the window, placing my suitcase beside my chair, my hands wrapped around the cup, letting the warmth settle into my fingers. For a moment, I just sat there. Not thinking. Just being. Then I took a small sip. It was bitter. But steady. Like everything else now. I reached into my bag and pulled out a pen and a folded receipt. It was the only paper I had. I stared at it for a few seconds. Then I started writing. Not a plan. Just pieces. Find a place to stay. Call clinic. Look for work. The words looked small on the page. But they were something. And something was better than nothing. I folded the receipt and placed it back into my bag. Around me, people came and went. Conversations stayed low. Coffee machines hummed. Life moved at its usual pace. No one knew what had happened the night before. No one needed to. I finished the coffee slowly. Then stood up. There was a small community board near the exit. Flyers pinned unevenly. Babysitting ads. Room rentals. Job postings written in different handwriting. I stepped closer. One paper caught my attention. Part-time help needed. Small diner. Morning shifts. There was a phone number at the bottom. I stared at it for a moment. Then I took out my phone and typed it in. I didn't call. Not yet. But I saved it. That was enough for now. Outside, the sun had risen higher. The streets were busier. Cars moving faster. People walking with purpose. I adjusted my coat again and started walking. This time, I paid attention. To signs, to places, to possibilities. A clinic on the next block. A small apartment building with a "for rent" sign. A bus route map near the corner. Details I had never needed before. Now, they mattered. Everything mattered. I stopped briefly when I passed the clinic. Glass doors, clean windows, a sign that read, Women's Health Services. I stood there for a second longer than necessary. Then I pushed the door open and walked in. Inside, the air smelled faintly of disinfectant. The waiting room was quiet. A few women sitting apart, each in their own thoughts. I approached the front desk. "Hi," I said, my voice calm. "I need to schedule an appointment." The receptionist nodded, reaching for a clipboard. "Of course." Simple again. I took the pen and started filling out the form. Name. Address. I paused there. Just for a second. Then I wrote the motel's address. Temporary. But real. When I finished, I handed it back. "Thank you," she said. I nodded. And stepped aside. It wasn't much. A cup of coffee, a phone number, an appointment. But it was the first morning I had done something for myself. Not for them. Not for a house that wasn't mine. For me. And for the life I was carrying with me. Quietly. Steadily. Without asking anyone for permission. The appointment was set for the next morning. 9:20 a.m. I repeated the time quietly in my head as I stepped back outside. Not because it was hard to remember, but because it gave the day a shape. Something fixed. Something certain. The rest of the afternoon moved slowly. I walked more than I needed to. Past streets I didn't recognize. Past stores I didn't enter. Just moving, letting my feet decide where to go. At some point, I found myself back near the coffee shop. The same bell rang when I pushed the door open. The same warmth. The same smell. This time, I didn't hesitate. I walked straight to the counter. "Hi," I said, "do you have anything part-time available?" The girl behind the register looked surprised for a second. Then she shook her head. "Not here, but try the diner 2 blocks down. They're always looking." I nodded. "Thank you." No disappointment. Just information. I turned and walked back out. 2 blocks wasn't far. The diner was easy to spot. Red sign, slightly faded, a few cars in the parking lot. The kind of place people go to without thinking too much. I stood outside for a moment, looking through the window. A woman in her 50s moved quickly behind the counter, pouring coffee, wiping tables, talking to customers like she had known them for years. Steady. I pushed the door open. A small bell rang. She looked up immediately. "Sit anywhere," she said. "I'm not here to eat," I replied. That made her pause. I stepped closer. "I saw your sign, about part-time help." She studied me for a second. Not unkind, just assessing. "You ever worked in a place like this?" "No." She nodded slowly. "Can you learn fast?" "Yes." A pause. Then she pointed toward the counter. Come back tomorrow, 6 a.m. We'll see how you do. That was it. No forms, no interview. Just a chance. I nodded. I'll be here. When I stepped back outside, the air felt different again. Not warmer, but clearer. I checked the time on my phone. Still no messages. I didn't expect any now. That part had settled into something quiet. Back at the motel, I placed my things down in the same order as before. Bag near the chair. Shoes by the door. Ultrasound photo on the nightstand. I sat on the edge of the bed and looked at it again. Still small. Still unclear. But constant. I got us a job, I said softly. The words felt strange. Not because they were hard to say, but because they were mine. No one had handed this to me. No one had decided it for me. I lay back slowly, staring at the ceiling again. Same crack in the corner. Same silence. But something had shifted. Yesterday, I had been told to leave. Today, I had found a place to go. It wasn't much. A morning shift. A clinic appointment. A temporary address. But it was enough to build from. Piece by piece. Without asking anyone if I was allowed to stay. Because I already knew the answer to that now. I wasn't waiting to be accepted anymore. I was learning how to stand, even when no one asked me to. I woke up before the alarm. 5:12 a.m. The room was still dark. The kind of quiet that feels heavier before sunrise. For a moment, I just lay there, staring at the ceiling. Same crack. Same silence. But I didn't feel the same. I sat up slowly, careful with my movements. My body was still adjusting. Not just to the pregnancy, but to everything else. I got ready without rushing. Washed my face, tied my hair back, put on the simplest clothes I had, nothing special. Just clean, practical. I looked at myself in the mirror again. Still tired. Still pale. But steady. That word stayed with me. Steady. Outside, the air was colder than the day before. The streets were mostly empty. A few early cars passing. Headlights cutting through the dim light. I walked to the diner. No hesitation this time. When I pushed the door open, the bell rang the same way it had yesterday. Sharp, clear. The woman behind the counter looked up. "You're on time," she said. I said I would be. She nodded once, then tossed me an apron. "Start with tables. Watch first, then do." Simple instructions. I followed. The diner filled slowly. Truck drivers, construction workers, a couple of regulars who didn't even need menus. Orders called out quickly, plates moving in and out. I watched everything. How she poured coffee without spilling. How she remembered orders without writing them down. How she moved without wasting a single step. Then she handed me a tray. "Your turn." I took it. Carefully. My hands didn't shake. Not visibly. I moved slower than she did. Less confident, but I didn't stop. Table by table. Coffee, water, clearing plates. No one asked me questions. No one needed to know anything. I was just another person doing her job. And for the first time in days. That felt right. By mid-morning, my feet were already sore. My back tight, the smell of food clinging to my clothes. But I kept going. The woman watched me from time to time. Not hovering. Just noticing. Around 10:30, the rush slowed. She leaned against the counter and crossed her arms. "You didn't quit," she said. I shook my head. "No." Another pause. "You can come back tomorrow." Not a smile. Not praise. Just a decision. I nodded. "Thank you." She waved it off and turned back to the register. That was enough. When I stepped outside, the sun had fully risen. The street looked different in daylight. More defined, less uncertain. I stood there for a moment, adjusting the apron still tied around my waist before realizing I hadn't taken it off. I went back inside, untied it, and handed it to her. She took it without a word. I left again. This time, I allowed myself to breathe a little deeper. Not relief. Not comfort. Just space. Back at the motel, I sat on the edge of the bed again. The same position as the night before. But everything felt slightly different. My hands smelled like coffee. My legs ached. My phone was still silent. But I had somewhere to be tomorrow. That changed things. I reached for the ultrasound photo and held it for a moment. "You see that?" I said quietly. "We're working now." The room didn't answer. It didn't need to. Because something had already started shifting. Not outside. Not yet. But inside. And this time, no one could take that away from me. The days started to fall into a rhythm. Wake up early, walk to the diner, work, come back, sleep. Repeat. It wasn't easy. But it was predictable. And right now, that mattered more than comfort. By the end of the first week, my hands had changed. Small cuts, dry skin, the faint smell of coffee that didn't fully wash away. I noticed it one night when I held the ultrasound photo a little longer than usual. My fingers looked different. Stronger. I didn't say anything about it. I just placed the photo back on the nightstand. The motel room stayed the same. Same bed, same quiet, same thin walls. But I stopped noticing those things as much. Because my days were full now. Not full of people. But full of movement. And movement kept me from thinking too far ahead. At the diner, I learned quickly. Not perfectly. But enough. I stopped watching every step. Started anticipating. Coffee refills before being asked. Clearing plates before the table felt crowded. Remembering who wanted what. Small things. They added up. The woman behind the counter didn't say much. But she didn't need to. One morning, she placed an extra slice of toast on a plate and slid it toward me. "Eat," she said. I nodded. Didn't ask why. Didn't say thank you out loud. But I ate it. That was enough between us. By the second week, she stopped watching me. That was how I knew I was doing something right. My phone stayed silent. At first, I checked it. Every hour. Then less. By the time the second week ended, I stopped checking at all. If someone wanted to reach me, they knew how. They just weren't choosing to. That thought didn't hurt anymore. It just settled. One afternoon, after my shift, I sat outside the diner for a few minutes longer than usual. My feet were sore. My back tight. The sun was lower, casting long shadows across the pavement. I rested my hands on my stomach. It had started to show now. Not much. But enough. I could feel the weight shift slightly when I moved. A quiet reminder. Always there. I didn't say anything. But I stayed like that for a while. Just sitting. Breathing. Then I stood up and walked back to the motel. Inside, I went through the same routine. Shoes by the door. Bag on the chair. Photo on the nightstand. But that evening, something was different. There was an envelope slipped halfway under the door. I stopped when I saw it. Didn't pick it up right away. Just looked at it. Plain. No name on the outside. No return address. I bent down slowly and picked it up. It was light. Inside, there was a single folded paper. I opened it. Just one line. "Come back, we need to talk." No name. No apology. No explanation. I stared at the words for a long time. Then I folded the paper back the same way. Placed it on the table. I didn't call. I didn't respond. I didn't ask who had left it. Because I already knew. And more importantly, I knew something else now. Not every door that opens is meant to be walked through. I turned off the light and lay down. The room went quiet again. But this time, the silence didn't feel empty. It felt like space I had earned. I didn't go back. Not that night. Not the next day. The paper stayed on the table where I had left it, folded, unanswered. Life continued. Morning shifts, coffee stains, quiet evenings. Nothing changed on the surface. But something had shifted underneath. On the third day, I saw him. I was just finishing my shift, The diner was quieter than usual. The late morning crowd already gone. I was wiping down a table near the window when a familiar car pulled into the parking lot. I didn't stop what I was doing. I didn't need to. I knew who it was. The engine turned off. The door opened, then closed. Footsteps. Slow. Hesitant. I kept wiping the table. When the bell above the diner door rang, I didn't look up immediately. "Sit anywhere," the woman behind the counter said, the same way she always did. There was a pause. "I'm not here to eat." His voice hadn't changed. That was the strange part. I turned then. He looked the same. Same jacket, same posture. Just less certain. For a moment, we just stood there. No one else in the diner paid attention. "Can we talk?" he asked. I placed the cloth down carefully on the table. "About what?" He shifted his weight slightly. "About everything." I nodded once. "Not here." I walked past him, untied my apron, and placed it on the counter. The woman didn't ask questions. She just looked at me for a second, then nodded. That was enough. Outside, the air felt cooler than it should have. We stood a few feet apart. Not close. Not familiar. "I left you a note," he said. "I saw it. And you didn't call." "No." A pause. He looked down, then back at me. "You just left," he said. The words sat there for a second. Then I answered. "You told me to." He opened his mouth slightly, closed it again. "That's not what I meant," he said. I didn't respond right away. Instead, I adjusted my sleeve slightly. A small movement, something to keep my hands steady. "Then what did you mean?" I asked. Another pause. "I didn't think you'd actually go." I nodded. That made sense. Not as an explanation. Just as a truth about him. "I was pregnant," I said. "I know. I had nowhere to go." "I know. You watched me leave." He didn't answer that. His eyes shifted slightly, but he didn't deny it. "That was enough. I came to bring you back," he said finally. "We can fix this." I looked at him for a moment. Not long. Just enough. Then I shook my head. "There's nothing to fix." His expression tightened. "It's not that simple." "It is," I said. Silence again. Cars passed behind us. The sound of tires on pavement filled the space between words. "She didn't mean it," he added. "My mom, she was just upset." I almost smiled. Not because it was funny, but because it was predictable. "She was very clear," I said. "She wants to talk to you." I didn't respond to that. Instead, I asked one question. "Where was she when I was at the bus stop?" He looked at me. Confused. "What? Where was she?" I repeated, "when I had nowhere to go." No answer came. Because there wasn't one. The silence stretched. Then settled. "I have to go," I said. I stepped past him, back toward the diner. He didn't stop me. Didn't reach out. Didn't say my name. And I didn't turn around. Because I understood something clearly now. They didn't come back because they changed. They came back because I did. I went back inside the diner. The bell rang behind me. Same sound. Same place. But everything felt sharper. I picked up my apron from the counter and tied it again without saying a word. The woman glanced at me once. Didn't ask. Just poured a cup of coffee and set it near the edge. I took it. That was all that needed to be said. The rest of the shift moved the same way it always did. Orders, plates, coffee. But my mind stayed clear. Not heavy. Not confused. Just decided. When my shift ended, I didn't linger. I walked straight out, past the parking lot, past the street corner, back toward the motel. The same path. But it didn't feel temporary anymore. That night, I picked up the folded paper again. "Come back, we need to talk." I read it once. Then I turned it over. Blank. No apology. No name. Just expectation. I placed it back on the table. And for the first time, I threw it away. Not carefully. Not folded. Just gone. The next morning, I went to my appointment. The clinic was quiet, like before, clean, neutral, a place where things were handled without emotion. The doctor spoke calmly, asked routine questions, checked everything twice. Everything looks stable, she said. Stable. I nodded. Are you under any stress? She asked. I thought about the house. The dinner. The door closing behind me. Then I answered. No. She wrote something down. Didn't question it. When I left the clinic, I stood outside for a moment, letting the air settle around me. One hand rested on my stomach again. It had become natural now. Not protective. Just present. Later that day, I stopped by a small office near the bus stop. A sign on the window read, "Legal Assistance, Walk-ins Welcome." I hadn't planned it, but I walked in anyway. The room was small, quiet. A man in his 60s sat behind a desk, reading through a file. He looked up when I entered. "Can I help you?" I nodded. "I need to understand my rights." He gestured for me to sit. I didn't rush. I sat down, placed my bag beside me, and spoke slowly. I was asked to leave my home. I said, "I'm married, I'm pregnant, and I want to know what that means." He listened. Didn't interrupt. Didn't react. Just took notes. After a few minutes, he leaned back slightly. "You have more rights than you think," he said. I didn't respond. But I held on to that sentence. Carefully. Like something important. We talked for a while longer. Details, options, steps I could take. Nothing loud. Nothing immediate. Just structure. When I walked out of that office, I felt something new. Not anger. Not relief. Control. Not over them. But over myself. That evening, back in the motel, I sat in the same place as always. Same bed. Same silence. But I wasn't the same person who had arrived there. I reached for the ultrasound photo again. Held it a little tighter this time. "They think I'll come back," I said quietly. The room didn't answer. It didn't need to. Because I already knew the truth. I wasn't walking back into a place that had asked me to disappear. Not anymore. From now on. If I walked into a room, it would be because I chose to. Not because I was allowed to. He came back again. Not the next day. But a few days later. This time, I saw him before he saw me. I was outside the diner, tying my apron before my shift started. The morning air was still cold, but I had gotten used to it. My hands moved automatically now. Not pull, adjust. Routine. Then I noticed the car. Parked across the street. Engine off. He stepped out slowly. Like he wasn't sure if he should be there. I didn't move. I didn't walk away. I just stood there. Waiting. He crossed the street, one step at a time. No rush, no confidence, just presence. When he stopped in front of me, there was a small distance between us. Not large. But enough. "My mom wants to see you," he said. No greeting. No apology. Just that. I looked at him for a moment. Then I nodded slightly. "Of course she does." He shifted his weight. "She's not doing well," he added. "Things have been difficult." I didn't ask what that meant. I didn't need details. Difficult had many meanings. None of them changed what had already happened. "She wants to apologize," he said. I let that sit in the air for a second. Then I asked, calmly, "Does she remember what she said?" He frowned slightly. "What do you mean?" "At dinner," I said, "when she told me to leave." He didn't answer right away. "She didn't mean it like that," he repeated, almost automatically. I almost smiled again. Same sentence. Same tone. Nothing had changed there. "I see," I said. A short pause. Then he took a step closer. "You don't understand," he said. "She regrets it. She wants to make things right." I adjusted my sleeve again. A small movement, familiar now. "What does right look like to her?" I asked. He hesitated. "That was the answer. I can take you back." He said quickly, "You don't have to stay here. You shouldn't be working like this. You're pregnant." There it was. Not concern. Correction. Fixing what looked wrong, from the outside. "I'm fine," I said. "You're not," he replied. "This isn't how it's supposed to be." I looked at him fully then. "This is exactly how it is," I said. Silence followed. Not uncomfortable. Just clear. He ran a hand through his hair. "You're making this harder than it needs to be." I shook my head slightly. "No," I said, "I'm making it clear." Another pause. Cars passed behind him. The sound filled the space again. He looked at me differently now. Less certain. More aware. "I didn't think you'd actually stay away," he said quietly. "I know," I answered. That part had already been said before. But this time, it landed differently. Because now, it wasn't just about leaving. It was about not going back. "I have to start my shift," I said. I stepped past him. He didn't stop me. But this time, he spoke again. "What do you want, then?" I paused. Not long. Just enough to answer honestly. "I want you to remember," I said. He frowned. "Remember what?" I looked at him once more. "The night you watched me leave," I said. Then I turned and walked inside. The bell rang. Same sound. Same place. But something had closed. Not a door. Something else. Something quieter. Something final. Because I understood it completely now. They weren't asking for forgiveness. They were asking for things to go back to how they were. And that was never going to happen. Not months. Years. Life didn't stop. It didn't wait for closure. It just moved. The diner turned into something familiar. Then stable. Then mine. In a way no place had ever been before. I learned every corner of it. Every regular. Every quiet hour between rushes. My body changed. Slowly. Then all at once. There were nights I couldn't sleep. Mornings I woke up before the sun. Already tired. Days when my feet ached so much I had to sit down between tables. Just for a minute. But I didn't stop. I kept going. Because there was no version of my life anymore where I could afford not to. And then, my daughter was born. It was early spring. The air still cold, but softer than winter. The kind of day where the light lingers a little longer. The hospital room was quiet. No flowers. No visitors. Just me. And her. They placed her in my arms. Wrapped in a thin blanket. Eyes closed. Breathing steady. Small. Warm. Real. I didn't say anything at first. I just looked at her. Then I rested my hand lightly over her back. "I've got you," I whispered. The same words. But this time, they felt complete. Years passed. Not dramatically. Not all at once. Just one day after another. She grew. First steps in a small apartment I eventually moved into after saving enough. First words spoken at the kitchen table while I made breakfast before work. First day of school with a backpack that looked too big for her shoulders. I kept everything simple. Consistent. Safe. No raised voices. No sudden changes. No doors closing behind her. She never had to ask if she was allowed to stay. That mattered to me more than anything else. Sometimes, at night, after she fell asleep, I would sit by the window with a cup of tea. Same position. Same quiet. But a different life. I didn't think about them much anymore. Not because I forgot. But because remembering no longer changed anything. 10 years later, on a quiet afternoon, someone knocked on my door. It was a Saturday. My daughter was in her room, drawing. The house smelled faintly of laundry detergent and something sweet she had baked earlier with me. Normal day. Normal life. The knock came again. Soft. Not urgent. I walked to the door slowly. Didn't rush. Didn't expect anything. When I opened it, she was there. My mother-in-law. But not the version I remembered. Her shoulders were smaller, her posture slightly bent, her face thinner. The sharpness in her eyes had faded into something else. Something quieter. She didn't speak right away. Neither did I. We just stood there. 10 years between us. Unspoken. Then, without warning, she dropped to her knees. Right there, on my front step. The sound was soft, almost careful. But it echoed louder than anything she had ever said. "I'm sorry," she said. Her voice was not the same. It wasn't calm anymore. It wasn't controlled. It was fragile. "I was wrong," she continued. "I didn't understand. I didn't think." Her words broke in the middle. I didn't move. I didn't step forward. I didn't step back. I just stood there, looking at her. The same woman who had once stood in her kitchen, wiping the counter, telling me to leave like I didn't belong. Now, on her knees. At my door. Asking for something she had taken without asking. Time passed. Not measured. Just felt. Behind me, I heard a small voice. "Mom?" I turned slightly. My daughter stood in the hallway, holding a piece of paper in her hand. She looked at me. Then at the woman on the ground. Then back at me. I didn't explain. I didn't need to. I stepped outside and closed the door gently behind me. Not to hide anything. Just to keep something intact. "She wants to meet her," my mother-in-law said quickly, her voice trembling. "I just want to see her, once." I looked at her. Carefully. "You told me to leave," I said. Her eyes filled immediately. "I know. I had nowhere to go." "I know. You watched me walk out of that house." Her head lowered. "I know." Each answer came faster now. Not defensive. Not explaining. Just accepting. Silence followed. Heavy. But clear. "I spent 10 years building a life," I said. She nodded. "I know. My daughter has never once felt like she didn't belong." Her shoulders shook slightly. "I know." I let that sit. Then I asked one question. "What are you asking for?" She looked up at me. Not strong. Not demanding. Just small. "A chance," she said. The word stayed between us. Simple. Familiar. I thought about the night I stood at that door. My hand on the handle. Waiting. For a voice. For footsteps. For anything. Nothing came. Now she was here. Asking. The roles had changed. But the memory hadn't. I looked at her for a long moment. Then I spoke. Calm. Steady. "I forgive you," I said. Her breath caught. Relief moved across her face so quickly it almost looked like pain. "But you don't come inside," I continued. That stopped her. "You don't get to be part of her life," I said, "not because I hate you." I paused. "Because I remember." Silence again. Not sharp. Not cruel. Just final. She nodded slowly. Tears falling without sound. "I understand," she whispered. I believed her. That was the difference now. Not because she had changed everything. But because I had. I stepped back. Opened the door. My daughter looked up at me. "Who was that?" she asked. I smiled slightly. "No one we need to worry about," I said. She nodded. Went back to her drawing. I closed the door behind me. Locked it. Not out of fear. But out of choice. That evening, I sat by the window again. Same cup of tea. Same quiet. But something had closed completely this time. Not a wound. Not a question. Just a chapter. She had come back to ask for a second chance. But I had already built a life where I didn't need one. And that was enough.